Hello, everybody. Josh Neighbors here of Locked On Big 12. Stephen Willis of Locked On Rebels. We are going to preview the 2022 Sugar Bowl 2021 season. What happens on the first day of 2022 between Baylor and Ole Miss. This is part of the Ultimate College Football Bowl preview that we're doing here for Locked On. So this is a pretty interesting matchup because this is one of those where each of these teams had really impressive seasons and nobody feels like they're being snubbed from the college football playoff. Nobody's that concerned about opt-outs. So it's pretty significant, I would say, Stephen, for both programs.
Yeah, it's very, very significant. When you look at these schools, but also Ole Miss is the high-flying offensive team, and the Big 12 team is actually the ground and pound, like LSU from 2012 team. So it's a nice stylistic difference between the two teams. I'm expecting a fairly good game.
Yeah, it's also interesting. Lane Kiffin has had an affinity for former Baylor assistants, right? I mean, he's had Kendall Briles and Jeff Levy, who were both coaches at Baylor, and obviously that's a tumultuous time in Baylor's history. But like you mentioned, that's when Baylor was known for that offense, right? The Briles tree, their offense, one of the more innovative and successful, and still successful right now in the college ranks. So I think that's kind of an interesting wrinkle to this matchup too.
Yeah, it should be a lot of fun. Like Jeff Levy's actually coaching in the game before he goes to Oklahoma. Right. So that's how personal he is taking that kind of, because he just wants to coach against Baylor, which I found to be fairly interesting.
Right.
But the weird thing is this, after 5 years, this has kind of become the Lane Kiffin offense. Now they bring the Baylor guys in to install the guts of it, the tempo and things like that to get in the offense. Then he kind of goes away from it because after year one at Ole Miss, Randy Clements was on the staff then. Joe John Finley was on the staff. They moved on. They were hired outside of the Baylor tree. So I think mainly the Baylor hire is for install purposes, and then kind of Lane does his own thing with the offense.
Yeah, and that's the other interesting part of this too, is there's two coaches here who were, for different reasons, rumored for head coaching jobs elsewhere, and it's just because of the success they had. I mean, 10-2 at Ole Miss. I know it's a school that aspires, to those heights, but it's really difficult in the SEC West. I mean, that is the toughest division in all of college football. There's no question about that. And what is the first 10-win regular season in program history? This game is in a lot of ways going to be a celebration of that for Ole Miss.
Yeah, I think so. If Ole Miss wins this game, it's the most games won in a season in Ole Miss history. As storied as they were back in the day. Now, a lot of that is because they played 9 regular season games.
Right.
So whenever they were really good and just would beat everybody, it just didn't matter. They didn't play enough games in the season. But 11 regular season games, the Sugar Bowl, which means so much to Ole Miss fans and the Ole Miss program. I think Ole Miss is in position. This will be 3rd in appearances in the Sugar Bowl history. And maybe if they win the game, they'd be 2nd in wins. The game means a lot to Ole Miss fandom from back in the day when Ole Miss was going to the Sugar Bowl fairly consistently. So I'm looking forward to see what that means. When I get down to New Orleans, Ole Miss fans are going to party. It's going to be a party. They're going to drink New Orleans dry. So I'm looking forward to that, to see if that bleeds over into the game. How are the players going to react to it? I think they're going to be excited. Like you said, no opt-outs for this game. And with them being that excited, I'm curious, this could be a really exciting game on both sides, even the Baylor side of the coin. This could be a really well played and a really excitement-filled bowl game for a non-playoff game.
Yeah, and that is the one thing also I want to touch on, is the fact that it's a unique spot because these guys, they're playing, and we saw New Year's Six bowls last year. The big one that comes to my mind was that A&M North Carolina game. I mean, we got a preview of Sam Howell's offense this year because none of the skill players wanted to be involved in that game last year, which was that was such an fun offense to watch. That's not the case. And I think, do you believe Matt Corral really set the tone for that when he said, no, I'm going to play? Obviously, a guy who is a first-round talent is going to be one of the first, at least in my opinion, 3 quarterbacks probably taken. I'd say Sam Howell, Kenny Pickett are probably the 3 that you're going to see have a good chance to go in that first round. At least 2 of those 3. Do you think he kind of set the tone with that, and everybody else followed suit?
Yeah, I think Matt Corral is probably the greatest leader of a quarterback in Ole Miss history. Whenever he said we all need to get vaccinated, and the whole team got vaccinated. So everything plays off of his decision. He has such a control because he leads by example, and he's such a good player, and he just buys into everything that's going on inside that building, which you don't see in college football very much these days. And it's going to help him whenever he advances to the next level. But yeah, I think it was his decision, and he led those guys down the road because we could have had opt-outs. Last year we had Elijah Moore and Kenny Yeboah opt out of the Outback Bowl. There could have been easily some outbacks or some opt-outs this year with like Sam Williams and people like that. But no, none of that seems to be happening. Mainly because I think this is the Sugar Bowl too. If Ole Miss would have gone to the Peach Bowl, it might have been a little bit different.
Yeah, and it's, once again, I'm never going to knock those kids for doing it. Their future is the most important thing. Jake Butt is a great example of what happens sometimes, and I know it's freak accident, but that's a guy who's going to be an NFL player, and I still think he's had a nice, okay NFL career, but, tearing an ACL going into a draft is not a great position to be in. I will say this: I'm a massive Matt Corral fan. I think he was known as kind of the wild card, a big armed kid, and all the talent in the world. But I will say this, and I think the Tennessee game is a good example this year. The kid will do whatever it takes to win, like whatever it takes to win. And I thought they ran him way too much in that game. He was clearly not operating at even close to 100% as that game continued, stuck it out. And I think that's what you're talking about. Like, he is one of the people, and from everything I've seen at Ole Miss, from Ole Miss fans and just kind of people, on Twitter that I follow that are fans of the program, that he is beloved. I mean, he's absolutely beloved because of that leadership, and because he does not seem to be, he does have a little bit of a cocky streak, sure, whatever, confidence streak, but like it also always does seem to come back to the team. Like, this is not a guy who's out there on an island by his own. This is about the group. It's about the collective.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird thing, but I think the Tennessee game at the end of it is kind of what cost Matt Corral the Heisman.
Yeah,
when he got hurt, because the next 3 or 4 weeks he wasn't quite 100%. Everybody was allowed to pass him in the ranks, so that probably cost him the major award by him going completely all out and giving absolutely every grain that he had against Tennessee. And it was needed. That game was needed. Yeah. And it was something, it was a huge win. But the important thing, whenever he kind of got hurt, whenever that happened, is you saw the emergence of the Ole Miss defense. And I think Ole Miss gave up over 20 points like one time for the rest of the season or something like that. And those guys building up, and you saw a team start to really gel together. Now, I'd hate to know, or I'd love to know actually, what this team would look like if Matt Corral would not have gotten hurt against Tennessee, because if that defense improved, I mean, you're looking at probably, 11-1, because they wouldn't have lost to Auburn. They had 5 trips in the red zone anyway.
That Auburn game was one of those where you're like, Lane, take, because at the end of the game, I mean, they would have been within 1 score if they'd kicked the field goals when they needed to, right? And that was one of those where it's like, I understand. We all get the analytics, man. We get it. But like, at some point in time, and at that point, we're all operating the assumption that your quarterback's not 110%. Like, take the freaking points, man. Just take them. Yeah. They're giving them to you. Just take them. Just take them.
He got carted to the locker room. I mean, it's crazy. But if there's a chance, Ole Miss should have won that game. But the analytics, and I always joke with people, Lane has a couple of games a year, and he did it with Alabama and Auburn this year, where he plays the game like a 12-year-old playing Madden.
Right.
That's just going to happen. And yeah, I mean, it was one of those things. It is what it is. You take the good with the bad.
Right. Yeah. With Lane Kiffin, you do. And on the opposite side, just get a little bit here about Baylor. What a season from Dave Aranda. They go 2-7 his first year at Baylor. And I always say this, He is one of the most introspective coaches, if not the most introspective coach in all of college football. He was very harsh on himself about the staff that he brought in, made changes. Larry Fedora out. They bring in Jeff Grimes from BYU. They bring in Eric Mateos, the offensive line coach. Their offensive line was one of the worst in all of college football in 2020. In 2021, it was one of the top 25 there towards the end of the season. Do they have top 25 offensive line talent? Probably not. They performed that way. Yes, they did. They got steady quarterback play all the year. Their defense, and I'll stick by this, the best game that Baylor played all year was the game against Oklahoma, and I think, there's a chance that maybe this game plays out that way because of how good of a coach Dave Aranda is. But a week after getting torched by Chandler Morris, back quarterback from TCU, he goes for 500 yards. They respond by going up against Oklahoma and the presumptive Heisman favorite at the end of the year in Spencer Rattler, and also a midseason kind of weirdly Heisman contender in Caleb Williams, and they beat the brakes off them. They could not get anything going on offense, and they made life miserable for them. And that just shows you that this team bought in. He really did make the changes he needed to make. They had Abram Smith, who was a converted linebacker at running back for them and was one of the best running backs in the entire Big 12 conference, a conference that is deep at running back. Every single team in the Big 12 conference has good running backs. And so for them to get to these heights this year and to achieve what they did was a testament to Dave Aranda. It was a testament to the team buying in and the changes that he had made. So I think that is where I look at this game and I say these are two teams that are great stories, right? This is in Oklahoma State. Congratulations to them for making New Year's Six, but Notre Dame and Oklahoma State were both teams that had a potential shot at the college football playoff, and they're outside looking in. These are two teams right here that really did accomplish, they reached about all they could this year. I mean, I know you said, Ole Miss could go on 11-1, but, kind of in the end, 10-2. I mean, that is, if you look at the roster and look what they had coming into the season, 10-2 is a maximization of talent for Ole Miss. And I would say, Baylor going, what was it, 11-2, whatever it was, is a maximization of talent for them also.
Yeah, like I said, this is one of those games that's going to be a lot of fun because Ole Miss is in the role of the traditional Big 12 team. Baylor's in the role of the traditional SEC team.
Right.
And I think the offensive line coach from Les Miles, it's kind of like you talked about Dave Aranda. They just kind of leaned into that LSU from 2013 when he first got there and started building that, as opposed to the chaos of trying to create the 2019 LSU team, because I think that's what he was trying to do in 2020 last year. But you can see them just it's really cool. It just really is. I like Dave Aranda. I think he was the heart behind that 2019 LSU team.
People don't talk about the defense enough. That defense had to be good enough to win, and they were top 30, and they played awesome towards the back end of the season, and they basically did their job. They didn't have to do everything, but he coached a championship level defense, and that's not one of the best defenses that LSU's ever had.
No, because LSU's still trying to figure out play volume, because that's the first year they really did tempo. And, so Dave Aranda had to figure that out as well. And it was a phenomenal job by Aranda.
Yeah, and so in this game, Baylor 1-point favorites. This game is on New Year's Day. I believe it is at 8:45 Eastern time as the start time. So 7:45 for all of you Central folks out there. And I think from what I can tell, I'm not sure how many opt-outs Baylor has in this game, but I think the spread is interesting. With just being a 1 point, Vegas seems to think this game is pretty much a toss-up, and I do believe it's kind of this high-powered offense going up against a month or whatever, however long it was, nearly a month and dozen plus practices of Baylor being able to say, all right, what are we going to do to shut down Matt Corral? What are we going to do to shut down? Because this Ole Miss offense, to me, while it is high-powered, it doesn't have the horses that's had on the outside. I know Drummond's been awesome, banged up during the year at some points. But this is a team that I feel like the guys in the backfield are almost a little bit better than the guys they've had outside this year.
Yeah, all of the receivers and the tight end got hurt in the middle of the season.
Right.
It was the weirdest thing. So whenever they were all clicking at the beginning, they were all clicking. early in the year. And you started to see them come back against Mississippi State at the end of the year. So they'll all be back for the game. Jonathan Mingo is a big piece in that wide receiving group to go with Braylon Sanders and Dontario Drummond. Casey Kelly will be a surprise at the tight end position to pay attention to. But you're right about the backs. This team was built around Jerry and Ely, Henry Parrish, and Snoop Connor. They're just the three-headed monster back there. And people don't realize they assume Lane Kiffin and this Baylor offense, and they're like, oh, this is just throw it around the yard. This team runs 65% of the time. And I mean, they've led the SEC in rushing like the last 2 years. And this could be a fun game. The tempo is what Ole Miss really is going to try and do in this game. They're going to try and go really, really fast. Baylor wants this game to be 21-10, 21-14.
Yeah.
If it gets in the 30s, you start to wonder if Baylor has the horses to actually keep up. So it's going to come down to who can impose their will on the other team. Is it that low-scoring game that Baylor wants, or is it a game in the 30s that Ole Miss wants?
Yeah, and let's make some picks here. So I think Ole Miss is going to win. I just think this group's – I think they do get kind of that 30 number. I think they got a lot of time. They'll be fresher, and I think they can catch the Baylor defense early. And, you know, I'm not sure if Gary – I think Gary Behan should be able to play, but maybe they roll with Blake Shapen. It's going to be an open – I think it might be an open competition going into the next season. Gary did a good job this year, but Blake is, you know, pretty able, competent quarterback. We saw that in the first half of their Big 12 championship game. So, they might get both guys some run in this game, but I'm going to go with Ole Miss winning this one. How about you?
Yeah, I'm going to take the Rebels in this game. I think they're going to get about a touchdown. I'm thinking 31-24.
I'm kind of right in that zone as well. Steven, where can people find you and the show and all of your work and its variety?
Yes, I'm the host of the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. We're available wherever you can find podcasts, and we have a YouTube channel that is currently being built. So whenever that's up, you'll get addresses on that on my Twitter. You can find me, as you see below, at the Stephen Willis, and I'm still waiting for the Locked On Show Twitter page as well.
You can find me at @JoshNeighbors_. You can find the show at LO Big 12. You can find Locked On Big 12 wherever you guys get your podcast and on YouTube. Steven, it has been a pleasure.
Thank you, man.